What's up, podcast friends? And thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process podcast. While analyzing the podcast data, I realized that many of the earlier episodes, some of which received the most overall downloads and are still extremely relevant today, are not being listened to as much as the newly released episodes. This is why I created the alphabetical list of colleges available on the podcast with the link to the related interview to the right of each school. Please use the alphabetical list as part of your college search, which can be found in the show notes and on my website, www.collegeadmissionstalk.com. The alphabetical list serves as an on-demand virtual college fair with schools from throughout the country. To highlight how valuable the alphabetical list is, I will release past episodes that receive the highest overall downloads on Wednesdays throughout the summer. Please share the alphabetical list with anyone you think that may benefit, as it has proven to be such a valuable tool for so many listeners. So are you ready? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the CAP, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Jua Howard, who's the Assistant Director of Admissions at UC Berkeley, of course, in California. Jua was with us on episode 154, where we did a panel discussion with multiple representatives from the UC system. And Jua, it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you here today. How you doing?
I'm doing well, John, and thank you for having me back. I enjoyed the first conversation with my colleagues. We always have a good time, so I was excited to speak with you again and talk about UC Berkeley specifically. So excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you, and I'm really happy to have you on the podcast, especially because every time I see you at a college fair, there's, probably 25 people waiting to speak to you. So I can't even say hello except for some crazy guy in the background just waving to you. But here we are, finally sitting down, and we're going to have a great conversation about UC Berkeley. And I am excited, as I know
Definitely.
so many people want to hear about it. So let's start by asking you to just give us a brief description about yourself, Jua. How long have you been in admissions, and how did you end up in such a position?
Sure. So I have been in admissions for almost 20 years now, which seems kind of for me personally crazy to say because I remember starting. So, and I started my journey in higher ed actually at Howard University, and um, coming in, I was thinking still about law school at the time. I think like a lot of us in higher ed, that's at least in admissions, that's not necessarily the goal. You kind of fall into it, and it's a really good fit. And that was really my journey. Went to um, apply for a job at Howard, more evaluation administrative, and thankfully the director saw something a little bit more in me and said, "Hey, I think really, outreach would be a really good fit." So I was like, "Hey, I'll try it. I get to travel, not on my dime. Sounds good to me." And I was still, a couple of years, or so out of college, so it was a really good fit for me. And so after working with Howard for several years. Also had a short stint with the Gates Millennium Scholars Program as a program manager, which I loved because it was a different experience from admissions, still working in higher ed. And at that time, Gates had the most. UC Berkeley actually had the most Gates scholars, so that
Mm.
kind of I already knew about Berkeley, but that kind of data really helped me in understanding. I think the sense of equity and the caliber of the students. And then eventually I made my way to UC Berkeley, and I've been with Berkeley now for about 14 years. So I've been around for quite some time with
Well, that's fantastic. And listen, you have such an awesome personality. We've spoken a few
them.
times. I did actually see you and got to chat with you down at NACAC when
Yeah,
we were
definitely.
together in Baltimore. So again, it's so great to have you.
Thank you,
Now,
John.
Jua, I recently read the retention rate at UC Berkeley,
Yeah.
96%, which is
Hmm.
one of the highest of all colleges and universities.
You got it.
The national average is about 70%. So
Hmm.
can you provide what else in terms of an overview that makes UC Berkeley unique within the University of California system? And, talk to me about your academic programs, campus culture, and anything
Sure.
else you wish to share.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. I think our retention rate we're very proud of. We typically kind of waver between like 96 and 98%. So I think we're very proud of that fact. I think when students come to Berkeley, they genuinely love it. And that really, to your point, really speaks to the culture. I think one of the things that we've done and that we do, I think, in helping, before I even jump into the academic programs, one thing that we really try to do is really try to make sure that we are a place of belonging and that people and that students feel that we are a safe space. And so one of the things that we do is our what we call our Golden Bear experience, which is our orientation program. So to me, I feel like that really plays a really big part with our newly admitted students. It's a 4-part process. It literally starts like end of May, early June before they come to campus, and it goes into their first semester, like a month and a half. And it covers everything from helping them register for their classes, learn how to navigate the campus, identify resources. Of course, once they get to campus, and really start to network, meet people, we have what we call our Calapalooza, which is a really big kind of fair or festival with different student organizations meeting the new students. And then we go further into how, navigating the campus, riding BART, our subway system. We talk about a lot of different things. And so I really like that because we kind of morphed into that format, John, a few years ago. We used to have them like a weekend orientation program, and now really extending it out to those really months long orientation program, I think has had a great deal and really trying to help students feel at home really quickly. So that's one piece of it. Um, but other things I think that make Berkeley really special, I think that really goes a long way, especially with the UC system. We are the flagship campus. And so I think that's a really major distinction that we started the UC legacy, as I always say. All 9 of us are great, and so, but we're always very proud that we started it and kind of set the tone in a lot of ways, depending on, I think policies and culture and what people think of for the UC system. So that plays a part with students. I also think the location is key. I being in Northern California, 20 to 25 minutes outside of San Francisco is a huge part. Berkeley, as I always say, is kind of an up-tempo college town. It's not in the thick of the city, but it's got a little kick to it, as I always say. Very eclectic, and the cafes and theaters, a lot of music, a lot of small businesses, things of that nature. So you have that culture, plenty of place for students to study. And I feel like that's then reflected onto the campus. But then kind of going beyond that, again, you are 25 minutes outside of San Francisco. Before you get to San Fran, you actually reach downtown Oakland, which is clearly another metropolitan city that students can take advantage of. But you're also 50 minutes Silicon Valley, San Jose region. You push it out further, a good hour and 40 minutes or so to the state capital in Sacramento, weekend trips, Lake Tahoe region, Napa Valley. So, what I always stress to students is that they have a lot at their fingertips, whatever they're trying to do, whether it be for academic purposes and research, job placement. We have a huge, clearly Berkeley presence in our alumni in the Bay Area, but also just entertainment because I believe in balance. If they're creative and they want to be in a band or they are a dancer or, they're a foodie, you have a little of everything in the Bay Area. So I feel like that culture of the Bay Area then is reflected on our campus. That really plays a big part, John. I think in students really coming there and feeling a part of it and saying, no, this is really where I want to be. This is exciting. There's a lot that I can do, whether I'm on campus or even off campus. So those kinds of things really play a big part of, I think, that retention. Um, and then I will say, and we'll talk about this a little bit further, but we're also very intentional about a lot of support programs that we have on campus with our different community, our kind of everything from our, Centers for Educational Excellence and Equity, which is our educational opportunity program for our first generation college students, our Transfer Center, which I know we'll talk about that, our Undocumented Students Program, our Gender Equity and Resource Center. So, and I'm just naming a few examples, but that is a key part of that retention because we have a lot of ways and things that we're doing to really help support students as an individual, not just the academic part, like really looking at them as a person and saying, how do we show up for you and make sure that you can thrive on our campus? And that starts from day one, not 2 or 3 years later. And so that's also another part, I think, of that retention.
Well, I appreciate you talking about the balance between everything that you offer academically and socially, which I too think is so important. You emphasize the fact that you're located in Northern California, 25 minutes from the great city of San Francisco. UC Berkeley, of course, is the flagship campus. And I also appreciate how you talked about the orientation program.
Yes.
It's not just a weekend program, but it's something that's ongoing, which of course attributes to the fact that your retention rate, as you put it, is somewhere between 96 and than 98%, which again is a testament to the great work that you do in admissions in terms of getting the right students on your campus,
Hmm.
but also the great work that UC Berkeley does to make sure that the students are welcomed, they're oriented to your campus,
Hmm.
and they want to stay year after year after year.
You
Now, I
got it.
want to talk a little bit, if it's okay, about the application review process.
Sure.
And I want to emphasize one of the things, the A through G academic course requirements, which is something that for us East Coasters, we're not that familiar with.
Yes.
So, Jua, what else would you say are the key components of UC Berkeley's application review process, including what you look for when
Hmm.
building your incoming freshman class?
Definitely. And I'll kind of I'll answer this, but kind of throw back to something I didn't talk about in the previous question, which is important because it's ties into the academic process. One of the things that we look at from an academic standpoint when we're reviewing applications is we are holistic. We look at everything. But a part of that holistic review is also thinking about the programs the students are applying to. And so, kind of going back to that retention and why students hopefully tend to love Berkeley and why they even decide to apply. I think at Berkeley, one of the other key things is the diversity of programs. We offer a little of everything. We have well over 100 different majors and minors, split between 6 colleges in one school. And so students really can tap into a lot of different things. So, some things I think that are distinct to Berkeley, we do really well with very innovative programs. So, we have some really great dual degree programs that are highly popular. So, I would say one of our arguably our most popular one is one called the MET program, which stands for Management, Entrepreneurship, and Technology. And it's a dual degree program between the School of Business, Haas, and our College of Engineering. And it's several different tracks based on their area of interest in engineering, whether it's civil or whether it's mechanical and so on. That's a major one. A lot of students apply to that. Berkeley is considered one of the best schools in the world when it comes to entrepreneurship. So that is really kind of one of those kind of pillars, I think, of preparation for the entrepreneurship program at Berkeley. But we also have other dual degree programs like our Robinson Life Science Business Entrepreneurship Program, where you're earning a business degree, but also a degree in molecular and cellular biology. And then for your students who are more kind of global in scope, we also have, and this is separate from the study abroad, we have programs with Sciences Po in France where you can earn degrees from both of us, and also a program with the University of Hong Kong. So just to give you an idea of some of the really distinct programs at Berkeley, but that plays a part of also the review process, John. So thinking about some of these programs, holistically, we're looking at everything. And so that's everything from your academic preparedness. So your some students say, well, if I have this GPA, am I going to be admitted? I'm like, it's not that simple. So we're looking at starting with your actual curriculum. Are you taking the most rigorous courses offered at your particular high school? So context is key, and that's in any holistic process. Context is the basis. What's available to you, and are you maximizing what's available? So, are you taking the most challenging courses at your high school? Clearly, what are your grades? But also I tell kids, if maybe you start a little rocky at the beginning, but your grades have improved during high school, that's a plus. We give you there's some flexibility there a little bit. But also, so those grade trends, but also getting outside of that. And I know we'll talk about testing, but I'll throw something out. If you have AP tests or IB exam scores, if that's a part of your curriculum and something that you've done, what are you involved in? Leadership, all these various different things. So all of these different things play a part of our holistic review. And then those specialty programs I tell students is also those are distinct that I talk about because they require additional things. So for instance, the general process, letters of rec, we only will request from a very small percentage of Berkeley, and we're the only UC campus that actually will even look at letters of rec. But we have to request them from students. But if a student applies to a program, let's say like the Sciences Po dual degree program, they are mandatory. And so that's really the really important part when I talk to students about our admissions process, holistic and all of that, but also doing the research ahead of time so that if you know you're applying to a very specialized program, that you are educated about what additional things does that program need from you so that you can be most competitive. I'm seeing students who are not taking all the steps, which then makes them less competitive in our process, and that's never the goal. So holistically, those are the things we're thinking about. And that other piece, that A to G academic course requirements, that goes back to the academic part. it's very similar to really most states where they have some kind of graduation requirements, kind of structure for students to graduate to make sure that they have a foundation academically from their particular high school, whether that's for the district, state, and so on. A through G academic course requirements for the UC system. And we talked about a little earlier, John, 'cause you talked about it for New York. Same thing for us. Like 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of a lab science, 2 years of foreign language, a year of a visual and performing art, and so on. So that's really important because for us, we probably, I would say, we are a little more strict on in-state students when it comes to the A through G because it is a California system. You can meet those requirements. Out of state, yes, we do look at that. We want to see that you are academically prepared to go to any UC campus. However, we give some grace when it comes to that from out of state kids because your school, your district, your state may have different requirements, and we don't want that to negatively impact how we're reviewing you. So that's where the context comes in. I'm going to be more focused on are you maximizing again what's available to you? But the A through G, that is something that we consider. And I tell kids typically when you read about it, look at it as a guide or as a reference to see that you are best prepared academically to come to one of our schools.
Well, that's terrific. And if we want to link anything related to the A through G components or anything else, just provide it to me and we'll put it in the show notes. I love
Definitely.
the overview of your holistic review process. You mentioned over 100 majors and minors, six
Hmm.
colleges, study abroad options, your dual degree program. And I love how you talked about the MET program, that's management, entrepreneurship, and technology, which is really an example of cross cutting, right?
You got
Bringing
it.
Exactly. And
You
these are
got it.
skills for the future, right? Because it's not just, I want to major in business, I want to be a CEO, an entrepreneur, but to have that technology component that
Yes.
really prepares students for the future that, we try to imagine, but at this point, we don't even know, right? But bringing that
Exactly.
MET program together is definitely,
Exactly.
again, preparing students for their future that they don't even know at this
You
point.
got it. And I'll say one of the things that you mentioned
Please.
just about the distinct thing about Berkeley. One of the key things about us as well is that we send the most graduates into Silicon Valley over
Wow.
any other university. And so that's a major part of it as well, John. I think of those kind of distinctiveness, but why programs like MET plays a really big part to what you just said, because you're getting that technical background with the business background. And that really helps in the internships. And then we have a lot of kids, and you know this even for high school kids, a lot of them have mixed interests and a lot of them have their own businesses now.
Hmm.
And so it's really allowing them to explore different parts of their interests versus saying you just have to do this one thing. And for me talking to students, they really now trend wise, I think over the last several years, more students really appreciate that. So
Well, that's awesome and a real example of tremendous innovation. So we appreciate the overview again. And of course, the college application process, Joe, we know it could be overwhelming and very stressful for students and their families. What are some common mistakes applicants make during the application process, and how can they be avoided?
definitely great question. um, we're speaking just in general, correct? As far as the
Yeah.
preparation and or
Yeah, in
um
general, in other words, you're on the other side, right? We're trying to take
yes,
the curtain back a little bit. You receive an application. Is there a mistake? Is there something that
got you.
students do that is a problem that they should avoid?
Got you. Okay. Just wanted to see how broad I should be in my response. I'll start with one that I'll say this is broader than just UC Berkeley and or the system. A lot of students are applying to a lot of schools, and I did a program. I talked recently to a colleague, and they were talking about one of their students applying to like 30, maybe
Wow.
almost 40 schools, and
Oh
I'm
boy.
kind of I was just floored, but I'm hearing that more often. I'm not understanding why are you applying this many schools, like that says to me you haven't really done the work to really whittle it down to a really workable list of schools that you will literally go to any of those schools if admitted. And to me, that's the goal. So I would say start with just doing the research ahead of time to really, really work with your college counselor, your, CBO, community partners, your parents, whomever else that is a part of your kind of village as students to really, really figure out which schools make the most sense for you. And to me, that does start working with your college counselor because that's their role and really being able to work with them to kind of to create a feasible um, practical list of your, of course, your REACH schools and, and so on. So that's a big one because I think that that's not a good route to go.
Hmm.
But one of the key things I'll say, especially in the midst of reading now, mistakes that I'm seeing students do is first and foremost, they're not giving us a lot of information regarding their activities. So, we talked about our school reading holistically, and a lot of schools read holistically. The other UC campuses, hundreds of schools across the United States now are holistic in their review process. And really, that's context. The more information you give me, the more I have to work with. So I have students who are maybe listing, they've been in an organization for, they really don't tell me how many years. They don't tell me how many hours per week they're investing in this organization. They don't tell me if they're a leader in it. If they've been president or vice president. Maybe they founded it. They don't tell me that.
Hmm.
And then they may usually a lot of times give us acronyms, and I try to tell students, please spell it out. Well, you don't know if we know what this organization is, especially for my, if it's something regional and I have a reader who's, or I'm reading, or whomever else is from California, they may not be as familiar with that. So don't assume that they know that. So spell it out, but also give me some information about what are you actually doing. Some students will give me a brief synopsis of maybe what the organization is, but they don't tell me what they're actually doing. What is your role? What have you contributed? Maybe you have helped in membership drives. Maybe you have helped um, take an organization to a state competition, or maybe you've led a research team. Any of these kinds of things, that's the information that we want to know, because that's the information that really helps me learn who you are as a person and how you're going to contribute to our community. So really giving us that additional information about, again, your role, your contributions, the actionable measures. What have you done? So that's a big one that I'm seeing students not do. In addition to that, I'm seeing a lot of students talk about, in the same vein, I guess, what their aspirations are if they come to UC Berkeley, but they're not telling me about what they're doing right now. And I want to know what you're doing right now, so that I understand, again, things that you're already executing, to really how you're already showing up in your community. That's what I want to know. It's great to know what your aspirations are, but you need to link the two. It can't be all aspirations and you're not doing anything right now. So that's a really big one that we need students to really talk about. Again, what are you currently doing? And then you can tie that to aspirations to say, hey, this is because I'm doing this. This is what I plan to do when I come to your campus because I'm already doing X, Y, and Z. That plays a really big part. Um, Also, a really big one for me, again, I'm going to go back to that word context, which I use quite a bit. If students, maybe have a bad grade pop up here and there, I may see that C or D, or it may be a student who's an all A student, but maybe junior year I'm seeing pretty much mostly Bs. I'm seeing students not explain to us what's going on. I need to know what's happening. That is, you are working against yourself if you don't provide us that information. Because when I see anything like that, that kind of is a red flag or kind of catches my attention, I'm automatically looking for an explanation from the student to say, hey, this is what's going on with me. Whether it be health issues, maybe it's troubles at home, maybe it's something at the school. I've had students who maybe had a teacher leave mid semester, or whatever that may be, to tell us that, because we cannot assume. If I have to assume, it's not going to benefit you. So you got to flat out tell me. So that's a really another one that students need to do that. And this is for a lot of the processes. We have additional comment boxes on different applications. We want you to tell us what's going on so that we can better understand the situation. That is where you have to advocate for yourself. So that's another thing that I'm seeing students do this past cycle, um, of not showing up in that way through the application. So those are some things off the top of my head that I would say where students are kind of missing the mark at the moment.
I want to welcome back Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert. Sean, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, John. Just wanted to do a quick shout out for an amazing deal that we have for college admissions process podcast listeners. We're offering 30% off all Prep Expert SAT and ACT courses and tutoring. It's live online. We've got the best score improvement guarantees in the industry. You'll get taught by 99 percentile instructors. And you can save 30% off when you go to the show notes of the College Admissions Process podcast. grab your discount code for 30% off and click the link in the show notes.
Thank you, Sean. So great to have you again. And to everyone out there, please note that if you make a purchase through any of our affiliate links, the podcast gets a commission. But rest assured that we would only promote products that we believe in and feel would benefit our listeners. Thank you all, and best wishes. Well, I think those are great examples. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jua, but you're basically looking at two main things. You're looking at the academic portion. In other words, can you handle the work, students at UC Berkeley? But the other piece that sometimes students and their families forget is you're looking to build upon your amazing community. So you want to know the type of student that they are going to be in class, the type of roommate that they're going to be, how they're going to contribute. And you're able to decipher that based on what they're doing now. But to your point, when speaking about current clubs, if they just list it, and by the way, don't just list the acronym, actually spell it out, right? Because there's so many acronyms out there. But if they just list the club and they don't talk about what they do, what they intend to do, what are the founding member of it? Do they have a leadership role? If you don't list this, students, then you're leaving it up to the admissions representatives to speculate. Same thing with academics. If there is a dip, explain it. If not, again, people like Jua in the admissions office, they're going to just speculate as to why. So it's very important. It's important to be mindful, students, that the overall application is a marketing package. Each piece has to be comprehensive, has to build upon the last. If not, it's a missed opportunity. Am I right, Jua?
You are spot on, and I think that was beautifully said. I like that term, missed opportunity. We use that quite a bit when it comes to essays, when it comes to information not provided. It is a missed opportunity. And what I always try to stress to students is that even with the like a UC Berkeley that is highly selective, we're looking for reasons to say yes. We're not looking for reasons to say no. We want you on our campus. So that is how we're reviewing. It's not the other way around. So give us that information. That is why I say when you have to advocate, you have to advocate. You have to brag about yourself as well. So that is when you're not telling us what you're doing in these organizations and you're doing phenomenal things. I want to know about that. If you started a business like we talked a moment ago about entrepreneurship at Berkeley being a really big thing. If you started a business, I want to know what's going on. Why? What was the idea behind it? What was the concept? Why? How's it impacting those in your community, maybe global community? Because a lot of kids are doing great work that are affecting the world in a positive way. Those are the things that help me understand who I'm dealing with. And again, if you come to our campus, what you are going to contribute, which is always what I'm thinking about. Berkeley's a school where I always talk about, we have over 1,200 student groups and organizations. There's a lot to do. So I do want to know, how are you going to then be a part of that and maybe hopefully add to that, maybe
Right.
create something new or take one of the existing organizations to a whole other level. So you're exactly right, John. It's both of those components that they have to come together again with that holistic review. It's not just one or the other. And I really like the way that you phrase that, because a lot of students feel like it's one or the other, or if one is necessarily stronger than the other, it may balance, counterbalance. Like if I'm really involved but I have poor grades, no,
Right.
because then if we admit you may not be prepared to handle, because you're going to have a lot more at your fingertips. You may not be academically prepared to come to our campus at that time. And it's not about ability, maybe about time.
Right.
And so yeah, you are exactly right. And again, how you kind of sum that up.
Yeah, and I like earlier that you said, students, we are looking to say yes. We are admissions counselors, not rejection counselors. So make
Got it.
sure, again, when you're filling out that overall application, that each part is comprehensive and includes everything that you can to create that picture where the admissions representative, again, doesn't have to speculate and sees how you're going to contribute to their community. And of course, that you're able to handle the work once you're on their campus. So I know that students who apply to the UC schools, UC Berkeley obviously included, they self-report their academic record. So Jua, could you just explain that? And at what point, if at any point, does the transcript come into play just to verify that the grades that are reported are indeed accurate?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of my students are confused about this part. And again, I'll go back to my earlier point of, this is why you all do your research ahead of time to understand these distinctions about different applications and application processes depending on the school. So you're right. So UC Berkeley again utilizes the University of California application that is shared by all 9 UC campuses. And so it is completely self-reported information. So students do not have to send us transcripts up front. You don't have to send us test score reports, anything. Everything that we review, I am going to extract it from your application. So I always say in saying that, first and foremost, it's really important that you have documents in front of you. So your transcript, even though you're not sending it to us, you should have it in front of you so that you are accurate, you are detailed. If you have a resume, whatever that you need that you're going to have to pull that information to put into the UC application should be right in front of you to make sure again that you are accurate. You do not want to have any issues on the back end of the process of things not matching up. That's where we may have an issue. And again, that's not the goal. So for us, you're going to fill out the information, all of your information, academic, your extracurricular activities, all of that. Both the self-report section, that is a really big one academically, where I see a lot of students sometimes get it wrong. To your a question a moment ago, where they really need to take their time in how they're filling out that section. So you know, the high school, the particular high school, the actual curriculum. Something that students sometimes don't know about the UC application is that you can select more than one grading system and
Hmm.
also more than one grading term. So let's say, for instance, during the pandemic, that's a really big example. Students would have maybe letter grades, maybe A through F, but also they maybe took some courses pass fail because of the pandemic in the school. You could actually list both of those on the UC application. However, you have to set it up so that it captures that. So when it asks you about grading systems, you can select A through F, but there's also an option for other. You can select other and then type in what that is: pass, fail, pass, no pass. That way, when you get to the next kind of tab in the application, it'll have both of those options. And then also terms. So if you're a student who's maybe taken course for one full year. You can put like one whole year or a year term, but also maybe you've taken classes that are just a semester. You can select
Hmm.
1 year, full year, and also semester terms. So that's a really big one. Sometimes can be very confusing in our process, just to kind of as a logistical standpoint with students where they get it wrong. But from there, you're going to take that, you're going to fill out the information, your courses. One big thing that I tell students, especially for my out of state kids, is really important that to know that we are recalculating to come up with your GPA for our purposes. And the way that we do that typically is we are working with your grades from 10th and 11th grade. Freshman year, we do not factor. That is seen as a transitional year. So 10th and 11th is what we're working with. We're also looking at grades that are part of that, to your earlier question, John, about the A through G requirements or A through G academic course requirements. We're actually pulling grades from courses that are part of that A through G. And then another really, really big important part of this is the rigor of your curriculum. So it's really important that students are designating courses that are AP, advanced placement, your IB, your international baccalaureate, your honors level courses, and also your college level courses, because those are the kinds of classes that we weight in our calculation process. And what students tend to do, John, is that they will not select it, and then their calculation won't count. For us, our calculation won't pick up those more advanced level courses in that weighted GPA. That's really important. You do not want to miss that because you're not giving yourself credit for the work that you're putting in. So whether it's AP, IB, you have that designation. Out of state students, honors level, you can select honors level, which is HL. That used to be very confusing to students. If it's honors level at your school, put it like this: anything that's on a more advanced level at your high school that's not AP or IB, you can select honors level. Whether it's titled honors level, maybe it's advanced, maybe it's accelerated, maybe it's gifted, those can all be selected as honors level. And so that's something that I always stress, especially for my out of state kids, to understand that, because again, you want to make sure that you're capturing the rigor of your curriculum in our calculation and something that we're going to view holistically. So that's a part of that self report section that really important. Also, the self report section should match exactly what's on your transcript.
Right.
Exactly. The course titles, everything, the grades, don't worry about pluses and minus we don't factor into our calculation.
Hmm.
But if it's on your transcript, you can put the plus minus. Do not stress that. Bottom line, make sure it matches what's on your transcript. That'll make it very easy and help you filling out the self-report section. And for those kids who are maybe dual enrollment, who have some college courses, they can also fill that out as well. And it's a section right after the high school section on the UC application, and they'll go through the same process.
Well, I appreciate that answer. And students and parents, please play it back again and again and again because Jules gave us a lot of pearls here, especially when you're listing the types of course, whether it's honors, AP, IB, what
Mhm.
have you. That's very, very important. But also with the grading system, was it A through F? Was it pass or fail? Whatever it
Mhm.
is, make sure that you indicate it and, of course, match it with what's on your transcript. I also appreciate how you talked about the fact that you recalculate the GPA, but you look only at grades 10 and 11. So you're
Mhm.
not looking at ninth grade, I would imagine, because you feel that ninth grade is, in fact, the transitional year from middle school to high school.
You
So
got
you're
it.
looking at 10th and 11th grade, but also you're only looking at the courses that fall within your A through G academic course requirements, which are
Right.
basically the major subjects.
You
So
got it.
that was an amazing answer. We really appreciate it. And again, students,
Yeah.
play it back if you're applying because there's a lot of pearls that George just gave. Did you want to
You're
add something
welcome.
else?
Let me say this as well, John. This is really important because I tried to, I think this fall I had to say this quite often, the distinction between what we're looking at for the calculation, but what are we looking at holistically when we're looking at your academic section. Just because the ninth grade is not factored into the calculation does not mean we are not looking at your freshman year grades, because I am. And a lot of students felt like we weren't. And I'm like, no, 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 two different things. The calculation is one thing, but
Right.
holistically, I'm looking at everything. What did you take? What did you earn? The rigor of ninth grade, ninth through 12th, all of that counts. And then 12th grade, even though we don't have grades, we are still looking at the rigor of your
Right.
courses because we're expecting you to continue a level of excellence. So 12th grade needs to be strong. You have to finish strong. So please know that we're still looking at 12th grade when we're looking at, again, holistically the academic section. So I always want to make that distinction between the two because students feel like it's, sometimes that can be a little confusing. So I just want to make to kind of clarify that part.
Well, I'm glad you did. And the bottom line, students, you have to keep building ramps, keep challenging yourself. As Jua said earlier, based on what's available in your high school, did you challenge yourself? Did you take what was available to you? Was there some rigor? These are the things that certainly schools like UC Berkeley are going to look at. And so, again, even though ninth grade doesn't go into the GPA
Mhm.
calculation, they're going to see it. Even though 12th grade doesn't go into the GPA calculation because your grades are not available yet, they're certainly going to look to see if
You
you
got it.
continued with the rigor. So, really, thank you for that, Jua. We
You're welcome.
appreciate it. And of course, I know that personal insight questions, the PIQs, are used in the UC system. Can you explain what they are, how to approach the PIQs, and
Mhm.
perhaps share an example that stuck with you?
Sure. So the PIQs are what we call our technically are the personal insight questions. And so I will say, even though I talked about you all not using acronyms on your application, I will say we use a lot of acronyms on our campus. So just FYI. And so if you're not sure, I will say is when you're talking to us, you're not sure about anything about an acronym, just ask us. Because sometimes we will get into that habit as well. So again, they are personal insight questions. And they are short answer questions. So for our process, when I first started at Berkeley years ago, we did have the longer essay style, and we shifted several years ago to the PIQs. To be a little bit more intentional about what we're asking of students so that we can extract the information that we really want to get to for the students. For the PIQs, there are 8 questions, and students have to answer 4 out of the 8, and they each question has a maximum of 350 words. So that's what you're working with per response. So again, short answer, got to get to the point. What I like is that students have variety. So I always tell students really read through all 8 of them to really think about what they're asking you to really figure out which 4 are going to be the best fit for you. This is not about your friend. This is not about your parent. This is about your story. Just because your best friend answered a particular 4, that doesn't mean those are 4 that you should answer. So I really tell students, I like that they have variety. Use it. Pick the 4 that make the most sense to you. Um, but also because they are short answer, get to the point. Cut out the fluff. I have a lot of students, again, beat around the bush for most of it. I'm like, get to the point, answered, because a lot of times they won't get to the crux of the message until their last sentence. Now
Hmm.
that is a missed opportunity, going back to that point earlier, because I haven't learned much about you. The entire point to me of the essays, and this is for any essay, is for you to provide more detail about you in your words. This is outside of the data and stats and list of grades and all of that. No, we get to hear about you in your words. Like we say, treat the PIQs as an interview. Like you and I are having a conversation. Talk to us. It's not a formal essay. Um, this is just for you to talk to us. Say, this is what I'm about. This is what I value. This is what makes me tick. This is what gets me up in the morning. Um, so I think I always say it's kind of the icing on the cake of the application, in
Hmm.
my opinion, where you really, again, you get to hear about the students from themselves. And I think that's highly important. Um, but I would say, yeah, but get to the point. That's a really big one. I always give tips on that one. A student I think this year that kind of stuck out to me that, not to give details, but they actually talked about is really a big one for me. As always, you see this about leadership, and they talked about creating a kind of a nonprofit, and the why behind the nonprofit and how it affected the pandemic and how it affected their community and how this nonprofit arose through the pandemic and having to, student wanted to do good for their community and how they created it, the lives they've impacted. It was so detailed and it was very heartfelt. And there was also a sense of humor in it, which was really nice, because
Hmm.
that added that kind of human touch. And so those are the type of PIQ response that always hit home for me because students are being honest, they're being genuine. Authenticity to me is the most important thing to do. This is about you, so be authentic. So the students' authenticity really came through very clearly. I clearly understood what's important to them, but also they gave me details about what they've done. Execution, again, they were very detailed about it. They gave me the why, and again, they showed me the impact. And so that really stuck out to me. From a lot of different things, but again, and also it was humorous, and I love to laugh. So I always tell kids, that's also being authentic. If you're a funny person, I like to laugh. If you're not really typically a really funny person, this is not the place to try it. That's what we say a lot in admissions, but that's again being authentic to your own voice, and you don't have to be funny. So that's the one that really stuck out to me this year, and I was like, that was one of those things that we say a lot of times at Berkeley. Students have a Berkeley spark. This student had a
Hmm.
Berkeley spark, just based on kind of this sense of innovation, this sense of taking the initiative to really be a change agent. And that change agent kind of factors really big when at UC Berkeley. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. First of all, you talked about the personal insight questions or the PIQs. You explained how they're short answer questions, 350 words max for each. There's a group of 8 of them. Students
Got it.
pick 4 out of the 8.
Hmm.
But it really comes down to the point, whether it's one of these PIQs or a regular larger essay for some other school,
Hmm.
when the admissions representative reads your essay, whether it's one of the PIQs or a larger essay,
Hmm.
did they learn something new about you? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If they did, great. If not, again, missed opportunity. So Jua talked about a student who mentioned something related to leadership. That person was able to articulate their why, their
Hmm.
impact, what they did throughout the process. Perhaps there was something that went wrong, and the student talked about their reflection, their thought
Hmm.
process, and how they pivoted. Whatever it is, it's got to be insight into something new. If you
Yeah.
just say that you're a member of the DECA club, right? I'm listing one of many, many high school
Hmm.
clubs, and that's it. And then you write, an essay just talking about the fact that you love DECA and you want to major in business. Again, you're not really learning anything new from the admission side of things. Am I right,
You
Jua?
got it. You are spot on. I have not learned anything else, and I can go back to the other parts of your application. And I'm like, all right, I already got it. That's a missed opportunity. Doesn't mean necessarily you may not be admitted, but that's another opportunity for you to provide additional information about yourself. So you have to take full advantage of every opportunity that you have to expound on it. Something I'll tell students a lot of times, even with our PIQs, I've had students who do a really great job where they may answer 2 different PIQs in one response. So those are the ones who are very, very, I would say very creative in their responses. Where I'm like, they're tackling 2 or sometimes even 3 responses in one. I'm like, okay, this is a winner. Just because clearly they've done their work to really read through all of them to
Mm.
understand. Okay, I can really talk about various parts of who I am and answer more than. I don't have to split it up. I can really kind of go into detail in this particular one. So that students, those are the students who really shine because it's very clear they've done their work and taken the time to really understand the questions and how they relate to that to them as an individual. So that's a really big one. I'll say this as well, and this is going back to our previous question about what students do. That's kind of something to avoid. To your point, John, about this is our chance again of learning more about you. Students a lot of times will talk about somebody else. That's not the
Right.
goal.
Right.
If you want to talk about someone who, a loved one, I love those. I
Hmm.
love those responses, but it needs to be like I always say maybe 10% that person, 90% you, 15% at the max for that person. Set it up who they are, the dynamic of your relationship, but then you need to shift it back to your point. You said the word, John, reflection.
Hmm.
Reflect on that relationship. What have you learned as a result of this relationship? Maybe they've inspired you, and then maybe that inspired you to be a part of something or to create a business or an organization or whatever. And that helps me learn then more about you, even though that person is really the impetus of that. And so I always tell students, really very careful about where you put the focus, not on someone else. It's not about them. This is all about.
Well, that's great advice. And a common theme throughout the podcast episodes is that, for example, a student might write about a grandparent, and the reps say how much they adore the grandparent and they want to
Yes,
admit the grandparent, but they didn't learn
exactly.
anything new about the student. So it's something to think
Exactly.
about, student. And unless you could do what Jua said, where you talk, he put it 10% about, a loved one, but 90% of it has to be about you. Unless you could do
Hmm.
that, perhaps stay away from a topic like that, which seems to
Yeah.
be a pretty common theme amongst a lot of
Yes.
essays, whether they're a
Yeah.
PIQ or a longer essay. And so
Hmm.
if you're reading 40 essays or 40 PIQs a day, it might be nice to, get something that's a little different than the norm. Would you
Yes.
agree, Jua?
I wholeheartedly agree. So my engineering students, I don't want to read about Legos every time. Um, talk about something else. Maybe a lot of students nowadays are doing research. So, some students are talking about research they're doing. I like to hear about those. But Legos, think about something else. I have a lot of people who are like master chefs, as I call them, and I love food. And so I love reading, but I get a lot of kids who talk about food,
Hmm.
but they don't write it where I'm learning more about them beyond that. Okay, I know they enjoy cooking, but it doesn't go anywhere else. So a lot of times those are missed opportunities. And then I'll throw this last one out because I get this quite a bit as well for my creatives, which I absolutely love. I tell a lot of them if you're a gifted creative writer, that's wonderful, but you have to temper that. And I'll
Hmm.
say it specifically for the PIQs because you don't have a lot of word usage to work with. It is very limited. A poem generally misses the mark. A lot of students, they're very creative, very abstract. Typically, they miss the mark. I tell kids usually I'm confused. I don't know where you're going. And going back to your point, I didn't learn anything else about you beyond that. Okay, you're a gifted writer. I get it. But
Right.
I'm trying to understand what kind of community member are you going to be. Be creative. There's nothing wrong with that, but it needs to be tempered so that again, I am learning more about you through that response. That is where feedback is helpful. Talk to your counselor, someone else who understands this process, is for them to be able to say, no, you need to you need to work on this a little bit more. I see where you're headed, but you need to temper it a little bit more and give some more, specific detailed nuance, and then, come up with the creative approach to it.
Well, that's such great insight and great advice. We really appreciate that. So let's shift a little bit to the test blind policy. The
Yeah.
UC system adopted a test blind policy for admissions. Joe,
Mhm.
could you explain what does this mean and how it affects the application process and applicant evaluation?
Sure. So we call it test free for the
Hmm.
UC system. It was very, very UC. We always coming up with new terminology. But to your point, John, the more commonly used term is test blind. But basically, we do not consider the SAT or ACT in the admissions process. It is not a part of it at all. So on the application, the UC application, there's not even a space for students to self-report the SAT or ACT. It's not error. We don't consider it. Please do not try to send us test score reports. We don't review them. That's a waste of time and money. I have students who will still email me or even come up to me at events or even parents sometimes who think, I'm playing. Or they'll say, well, what else are you all considering? Or even though you don't read it, okay, how can I give it to you? It's like, no, we don't consider it. It's not an option. Let's move on. And so For students, I think where they get confused is schools that are test optional. That is
Hmm.
not test free or test blind. Test
Right.
optional, clearly it is an option to still submit your test scores if you feel that they are strong and they will make you more competitive within that admissions process. Then it's an option to still admit those test scores. Now, if you're a student who maybe your test scores are not really strong, but you are a stellar student in every other way, that you don't have to submit those test scores and you are still equally as competitive within that process. For those of us that like the UC system who are test free, it is not an option. So that's the
Right.
biggest thing. But what I try to stress to students is that it does not make us any less competitive. And it doesn't mean that we're looking at anything else more than we did when we did require tests. It's still holistic. It's still
Right.
competitive. So I'm looking at everything else holistically. So I tell students, I mean, clearly you're more than a test score that you did for, a few hours in a test score. Clearly you're much more than that. I've had to tell parents that. Your child is much more than a test score. I hope you know that. So, we're talking about 4 years of continuous academic excellence of their grades and rigor and challenge and research and all the things that they're doing day to day. That's where the gold lies for us. So I'm looking at everything else. We just don't have that test. However, tests still play a part potentially. Um, Students still have the opportunity to submit AP test scores, or up front they're self-reporting their AP scores,
Hmm.
IB scores as well. Also for my international students, if they have maybe A levels, things of that nature, that is still a part of our process. If students have that as a curriculum or part of their curriculum, or they choose to take those exams, we will still consider those kinds of exams, John.
Hey John, this is Grace from the University of Florida. What I love most about Dormify is that their products are truly made with college in mind. My absolute favorite product I purchased was the charging headboard. Having the extra charger in my dorm room, which already had super limited spots to plug in, was a game changer. It is functional and seriously cute and trendy. I can't recommend it enough. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Grace, for sharing your thoughts on Dormify. For those of you listening, be sure to check out our show notes where you could find our Dormify affiliate link and our most updated coupon code where you can save 15% on most Dormify products. As a reminder, our podcast does receive a small commission for purchases made through our affiliate link, but rest assured, we only promote products that we believe in and feel would benefit you, our listeners. Thank you, and best wishes to all. Well, I appreciate that. And I was going to say two things. Number one, I appreciate the test free nature of the UC system so that students don't have to worry about submitting SAT or ACT scores. But a follow up was going to be, what about the IB and AP scores, where there are schools out there that they're test optional, but they're happy to take those scores under consideration. So I'm glad you
Mhm.
mentioned that, Joe. I really appreciate it.
You're very
And I was
welcome.
just curious, do you accept those scores also for credit?
We do. We're actually, I would say and I mean, I'd say definitely for Berkeley and our kind of peer set of schools, we're pretty liberal. So
Hmm.
typically we give credit for 3, 4, or 5 on the AP exams. And
Great.
for the IB exam, students have to take the higher level exam first and
Hmm.
foremost. And a 5, 6, or 7, they'll get some credit. So we're actually, yeah, we're
Fantastic.
actually pretty liberal at giving out credits. And a lot of these students, they come in with a pretty good amount of credit for their work. And for again, highly selective schools, a lot of times that's not the case.
Right.
They it may help in placement. Sometimes it doesn't help even with that. So yeah, but that is something we do quite well. So definitely.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad I asked the question. So, of course, Jua, many students and their parents are concerned about the cost of college, which
Yes.
continues to be on the rise, and it's a
Hmm.
big consideration for so many students and their families. Can you explain UC Berkeley's approach to financial aid and scholarships, and what steps can students and their families take to help ensure that they can afford whatever school they're going to attend?
Sure. For us, it really starts first and foremost with, and again, I'll say this, even though I'm speaking for UC Berkeley, it's also important going back to that research that you all are doing research for any of the schools that you're applying to in their respective process. For us, with the UC system in Berkeley, we utilize the FAFSA, so the free application for federal student aid. That is the only form that we require. We do not use a CSS profile. We don't have in a supplemental form. It's just the FAFSA. Now, if I have my California students, they also have the California Dream Act application. That's another way to apply for financial aid. But for most students, FAFSA is going to be the way that a lot of them will apply for need-based financial aid on our campus. And I tell students to apply for that. Even if as a family you think you may not qualify, it's very important that you still fill that out because that may be tied to scholarships that we may offer you for us to gauge how much need we have that you may have, or just to have the paperwork and just kind of dotting your I's, crossing your T's. So really important that you fill out the FAFSA. For us, need-based aid looks very different. Of course, federal aid is one of the main ways. I'll talk to my out-of-state kids first. The need-based aid, honestly, for through Berkeley and a lot of the UC systems, you don't see a lot of it. I'm gonna be very transparent. Federal aid is most of what you will see when it comes to need-based financial aid. So, being that, let's say, a student is Pell Grant eligible,
Hmm.
that is definitely something that you can use on our campus to help pay for school. I'm hoping that more money will be allotted for Pell Grant to knock those up, for students in general federally. But Pell Grants can be used on our campus for out of state students. Now, the institution-based grants that a lot of times we give to students, where you're not paying it back, it's like a scholarship, but it's not a scholarship. But students are not paying that back. We don't give a lot of that to out-of-state students anymore. We used to do that when I first started with Berkeley. We don't do that anymore. So you really won't see much of that at this point. So the most of the need-based aid is going to be more federal aid that you see. Um, Now, for in-state students, you will see more of that. You will see grant aid that may be administered if you're a California resident. You will also have programs such as our Blue and Gold kind of scholarship program, where we are kind of capping tuition at a certain level for families that make a certain level of money or not above, to kind of make sure that the middle class is kind of well, that's actually called the Middle Class Access Program, to kind of cap that amount of what students and what families have to pay. Um, Something we have done, I will say as well, and this is for all students, in state and out of state, we have what we call a tuition stability program. So this is where now, when students start with Berkeley, really any of our different programs at different campuses, we're going to cap where your tuition is, where you start, and you'll pay the same amount of tuition for up to 6 years that you're on our
Hmm.
campus.
Well,
So
that's
that
really
will
good
not
to
go
know.
up. Yeah, so I'm excited about that because it is expensive. So my thing is that is something that we are trying, where we are capping that amount with the tuition stability program. And to getting beyond that, kind of bridging from more of the need-based aid to more scholarships. We do give some merit-based scholarships. One scholarship, which is at Berkeley, our top scholarship, is called the Regents and Chancellor Scholarship. So when
Hmm.
students apply for admissions, we will automatically consider them for that particular scholarship. And we will actually reach out to them to let them know they're finalists. They will go through an interview process. If they're selected, it's pretty much a fully paid ride, research funding, guaranteed housing, and so on. And so again, that's open to all students who apply. In addition to that, we have our leadership scholarship that's through our alumni association. We have an African American initiative scholarship that students can apply for. Um, and then for in-state students, we also have, like again, I mentioned a few moments ago, our Blue and Gold scholarship program. We have what we call our Fiat Lux scholarship, which this scholarship is attached to certain high schools within the state of California that are Fiat Lux schools. They have certain programs, and that's money that students can receive. One of our newest scholarship programs, and I'm really excited about, is our Native American Opportunity Program for students who are for our Indigenous Native students in the state of California who are part of a federally recognized tribe that will pretty much cover pretty much most of their expenses. And that's a newer program. So there is money there. But as I mentioned, you have to learn how to navigate that to
Hmm.
see what's going to make the most sense, because college is expensive and we're no different. I definitely, and that's also why I made the distinction between the in-state students versus out-of-state, because there are a lot more financial aid opportunities for my in-state students in comparison to my out-of-state students. And so for my out-of-state students, I always really try to stress to them, please take your time to understand our process, what is available. There's also money once you're there, the different, scholarships and contests and different things that you can qualify for as a Berkeley student. But knowing that you're coming in, that you may not be offered a lot of financial aid. So hopefully you are doing your research on outside scholarships. So, for instance, we do a couple of things through our financial aid page. We have what we call our calculator, which is our net price calculator,
Hmm.
where students can kind of gauge what their financial aid may be if they come to Berkeley. So that's a tool that I always tell students that they should check out. And that's for any school. All of us have to have them in the United States. So check that out. But then also, we have a really cool scholarship search engine, John, for outside scholarships. So
Hmm.
I tell students to like go on there, just look for scholarships, look for ones that are going to be a good match for you. Start applying for those because as a high school student, I've always been an advocate for students applying for outside scholarships. And they don't have to be a Gates. They don't have to be a Coca-Cola. They can be $500 through your local firehouse. It could be through church. It could be whatever, through research you're doing. But there's a lot of money out there. So I always really try to encourage students to really start that scholarship search process as early as possible so that when it's time to come, whether they come to Berkeley or not, they have other monies to help pay for their education. And that's a really big one for a lot of my out of state students. Our freshman class brings in annually about $64 million in outside scholarships every
Wow.
year. So
Hmm.
that's a major way that a lot of kids will, help kind of pay their expenses coming to Berkeley, John.
Well, I really appreciate that comprehensive overview. You took the time to talk about your in-state, obviously your California students, and the many that come to Berkeley or want to come to Berkeley from out of state. You mentioned your net price calculator, which is very important. All schools must have it. Sometimes it's as simple as doing a search, UC Berkeley net price calculator. But you also mentioned your scholarship search engine.
Hmm.
Jua, anything that you want to link again in the show notes to help students with whether it's the net price calculator, the scholarship search engine, or you listed so many different types of scholarships for in-state students and out-of-state students, just provide it to me and I'll gladly put it in the show notes.
I got
Now,
you covered.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
No, I said I've got you covered. I will definitely send them your way.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Jua. And transfer students also play a significant role in the UC system. So,
Yes.
what unique considerations do transfer applicants face, and how can they best prepare for a successful application process?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about our transfer students just because everybody's not going to be admitted as a freshman. And a lot of
Hmm.
times, even if they are, it may not be the right timing. And so the degree is a degree. And it doesn't
Right.
matter how you get there as long as you get there if this is something that you want to do. Yeah, transfers are a major part of our community. We have a policy where for every 2 freshmen that we admit 1 transfer student.
Hmm.
So we bring in around 3,000 who transfer every fall. So it's a
Wow.
large part of our population. Some things to know about our process is that I'll say over 90% of our transfers are coming from California community colleges. That
Hmm.
is our first priority because first of all, everything is articulated. It's very clearly articulated. If you go to this college, let's say Santa Monica College, if you take this and take that, this is how you can be competitive and get credit for these particular courses. But also, we want to make sure that we're covering those students who cannot earn a 4-year degree. So a lot of students feel like they can go to another UC campus and they'll have a kind of a step up as a transfer student. I'm like, no, you're not first priority for us because you can earn a 4-year degree from a great campus. So our first priority are California community college students,
Hmm.
then just community college students as a whole. And then last would be really our students at 4-year institutions, whether it is another UC campus, in-state or out-of-state 4-year campus universities, and so on. And the difference is where with the freshman process, it is holistic. With that, if you apply as a freshman, we'll review you, period. For transfers, there are certain kind of benchmarks they have to meet before we kind of go into our comprehensive review for transfers. So there's that's the biggest distinction. So for that, there's a minimum GPA requirement. So like for us, at Berkeley specifically, and this is just Berkeley, I'm speaking for us because there's different things that we utilize for the system versus per campus. Berkeley 3.0 minimum, 60 semester units or 90 quarter units, and then also a general education requirement. So, your English, your math, your language other than English. So once you kind of meet those 3 kind of benchmarks, then we move into our comprehensive review when we look at everything else. One of the biggest things for transfers that makes a huge difference in our process is that are they academically prepared to declare their particular major once they get to our campus? So so I'll say if a student who wants to study psychology, you should have already taken those prerequisite classes, psychology courses at your other institution first so that when you come to Berkeley, you're able to declare the major and move forward. So those prerequisites play a really, really big part of our process to be most competitive, in addition to the GPA and those other things. And then what else are you involved in? And for transfers, they look different. These may be my full time, people who are working full time jobs and who are parents,
Right. Right.
who've got more life. This may be some of my military and so on.
Mm.
So that population looks very different. I love that population. And I love reading
Hmm.
those applications. They have a lot of life. So those are some differences in the processes, John, as far as kind of how we review transfers in relation to freshmen. But we have a lot of support systems for transfer students, and that's a really big one for my transfer students. If you're looking at schools, really do the work to understand how do they support you when you actually matriculate. Once you get there, how do they make you feel a part of the community, and what do they have in place? Like for us, we have our transfer center, which is amazing. It is a huge
Hmm.
hub to really support transfer students, but we also have our student parent center. We have our reentry student program. This is for students who are 25 years and older, and so on. So again, that support system is really important for transfer students, depending on whatever school they're going to, again, so that they know that they're a part of the community and they have what they need to thrive once they get there.
Well, I really appreciate that. And you emphasize all of these different support systems that you have for your students, which I think is terrific. I was curious, Joel, what support does UC Berkeley have in place for students that may have had an IEP while in high school? That's an
Hmm.
individualized education plan, of
Hmm.
course, to help them ensure that they continue to be successful once they're on your campus.
Sure, definitely. So that starts with what we call our disabled students program. And we use that for any type of disability, learning disability, neurodivergent, physical, whatever that may be, it encompasses all. We actually have the first program of this kind in the nation for schools.
Hmm.
So that's a really
That's
big one
awesome.
for us. Yeah. And it's really, I'm always, it always makes me smile when I meet students who may have some type of disability who know that. And that's one of the
Hmm.
reasons that they're interested in Berkeley. And so it's really important that when students apply, first of all, that's something that you can talk about in your application. Let me just say that first and foremost, because a lot of students sometimes feel like that's not something I should share. There's sometimes a sense of shame. There is none. And it should
Hmm.
be a part of your
That's
story,
right.
because if this is a part of, if you have some type of IEP and it has affected your performance potentially and or access to anything, I need to know that,
Right.
because I can't just read the application, academically see all of that without the context of that. So let me start by saying that that's really important context. Please share that with us. But once, let's say you're admitted, you decide to come to Berkeley, the Disabled Students Program have that information. We're going to send you information so that you can communicate what you need. What type of accommodations do we need to provide to you in the classroom, in your dorm, whatever that may be on our campus, so that you have the support that you need? That is a part of that. So it really, really important to students just to communicate that to us so that we know that. Some students don't tell us at all, and you don't have to. It's not mandatory. But if you know that you need certain things so that you can do your best on our campus, I always tell students, please, please share that with us. We will definitely meet you where you are to support you from day one on our campus.
Well, I really appreciate you emphasizing that if in fact you had an IEP or something else while in high school, definitely let someone like Jua, who's in admissions, obviously at UC Berkeley, let them know about it. Again, it comes
Mhm.
back to anything that you don't share, you're leaving it up to the admissions representative to speculate, which is not going to help you. So if there's something, you have a learning disability or whatever it is, let people know, like Jua, so that they can put resources in place to help you again, so that you continue to be successful once you're on campus. So we really appreciate that insight, Jua. What
Absolutely.
about aspiring student athletes? How does the application process differ for them? And what advice can you offer them?
Sure. I would say the process is the same as far as the admissions process when it comes to the reviewing of the applications and so forth. I would say, but before I even kind of dig in that, I will say first and foremost, especially we are Division One,
Hmm.
so we are making the shift to a different conference this fall. So we shall see how this turns out. But because we are a Division One school, there's a lot of policies and kind of restrictions per se that have to be met and kind of in place to make sure that we are meeting guidelines, and not being put into any kind of liable space for us and for you. So what I always tell students first and foremost, if you are an athlete, let's say you have not been actively recruited yet by a team on our campus, if you go to our website on the kind of the Cal part of the website, Cal Athletics. When people talk about Cal, like the shirt I have on, you guys can't see it. It says Cal. That's the athletic part of UC Berkeley, Cal. And so there's a website for Cal Athletics. On the top of the page, there's actually a recruit interest form that you can fill out and submit it. So I would say start there. Make sure that you go ahead and submit that form. If you have not already started the conversations with the coach or coaches, submit that. There's also communication information for the different coaches on the website. Follow up with an email. Go ahead and put the interest form in, then follow up. That way that the communication starts early. You know, with sports, it moves quickly. There's a lot going on. Maybe they're coming to your area for recruitment. Maybe they'll get a chance to speak with you if they're in your town, your city, your region, whatever. So make sure that you start that communication as soon as possible, because I know a lot of times these coaches are looking at students for years. So you really want to make sure that you start that as soon as possible. You can be a walk-on our campus, but clearly the sooner you have the communication, always the better. Not to mention they have money. So you never know, that also might be a scholarship money that may help. So I would say start there, start the communication. We also have sports clubs. So this is separate. So we have varsity level and we have sports club. Some sports club teams also recruit. They
Hmm.
compete nationally. They're no joke. So that also may be something you at least want to reach out and ask. As a prospective student, you are always welcome to reach out and ask what you need to know. We all recruit, not just admissions. So feel free to reach out to that coaches and just ask questions and see what's going on there. So I would encourage them to do that. And what will happen, that's one part of the process. So you're taking care of the kind of athletic part of it. From the admission standpoint, it's the same process. You're still going to talk to us. Hopefully, you talk to me or whomever else is in your region. You come to college fairs, the whole bit. You still apply through the UC application. And in our office, we actually have athletic liaisons. So I have colleagues who that is their role. They are the liaisons from admissions to the athletic coaches, and they work with the coaches to make sure to identify all athletes who have applied, any issues with the process. They work firsthand with the coaches. So that's kind of the behind the scenes where they will work with the coaches to make sure everything is good. If a coach is recruiting someone, they communicate with us. So that is the behind the scenes part of it. So from a student standpoint, really it's just, again, start the communication, follow the guidelines, clearly keep, whatever sports you're in, keep doing what you're doing, and then academically make sure that you're still prepared, because as an athlete, you still have to be at the same level as everyone else applying to Berkeley.
Right.
And our athletes are. You have students who are junior Olympians and they still
Hmm.
have excellent grades and are highly involved. So some students feel like, well, I don't have to be as strong in that area. I said, unfortunately, you do, because coming to Berkeley, you have to be able to academically also thrive. Now, let me say this, there are a lot of resources for our athletes because their schedules are very different with the travel schedules and the practices and so forth. We know that. So there's a lot of support to support them, but you have to also, again, be academically prepared to come and still thrive at Berkeley, in addition to being a world-class athlete.
Well, we appreciate that, especially all of the different parts of your website, the recruit interest form, the different contact information for your coaches. And what I'll also include in the show notes is the link to the NCAA, because,
Yes.
the rules and the guidelines, they do change. So it's very important, if you're an aspiring student athlete, to make sure that you're up to date with the NCAA rules. So, Jewett, this has been an amazing conversation, as I knew it would be, because not only is UC Berkeley awesome, but you're amazing yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for your time. And before I get to the last question, I just have to ask, is there a question I didn't ask that you wish I had, or perhaps a topic that I didn't bring up that you wish to share with our listeners at this time?
Um, Not really, not anything specific, because I feel like hopefully we've been able to kind of bridge off into other parts of the conversation from maybe some of the initial points. I think one of the biggest ones for me that I'm always, I think, focused on is the support part, which I think you can tell from my
Hmm.
responses. In addition to admissions, it's not just enough that we admit you and you get to Berkeley, but how do we support you as an individual, as a scholar, as an athlete, as a creative once you come to us? And that's a really big one, because to me that goes back to that rate of keeping our students, again, of like, how do we support you? So it's not, we don't just, even though I help get you in, I want you to love being at UC Berkeley. I want you to love the experience. So that is always a part of my responses. So thankfully, I've been able to kind of bridge all of that in. So I will say, so no, so there's no additional questions, but I will say this as well. if you all have any questions moving forward, you can go through our website, through the admissions page. There's a kind of contact us form. You can send us messages. We have a virtual front desk where you can sign on Zoom and ask questions. You can submit your questions. If you are, if we come to your school for a school visit, talk to us. If we're at a college fair, come out. We will post these things. So always feel free to ask your questions. I always want to encourage students to do that because I know we've covered quite a bit, John, but there's
Hmm.
always going to be a lot more questions. But I always want you all to know you are always welcome to reach out and ask the questions that you may have. That is why we're here.
Well, we appreciate that. And you did an awesome job, not only explaining your review process and how you get students to your campus, right? Admitted to UC Berkeley,
Yeah.
but also once students there, you really explained the many different supports that are available to all of your students, which of course makes that amazing UC Berkeley community, as you put it, up to about 98%
You got
retention
it.
rate, which is just incredible. This has been a phenomenal conversation, Joel. Unfortunately, it does lead us to the last question, which is what are your top 3 pieces of advice you would provide students and their parents getting ready for the college admissions process?
Yeah, sure. So I had to think about this. I like this question. So I would say one of the first things I always tell students is start early.
Hmm.
I'm seeing a lot more even freshmen coming to me at college fairs, or sometimes if a school will allow it to a school visit, the different programs or panels, whatever. So start early. I think the sooner that you can start, the better. Just so that to understand that you all are not going to learn all of this, what we're talking about overnight. It's a process, and a lot of times it takes years to get it. We even internally in admissions, we sometimes there's confusion because there's a lot of this. The landscape is constantly changing. So start early. The earlier that you start it, the more comfortable you will be with the process. You'll learn our terminology. You will learn the right questions to ask for you, and they may change during the process, and that's
Hmm.
okay. But you'll learn the right questions to ask for you. You'll understand what kind of schools you want to apply to, and so on. So the earlier that you can start it, the better. Scholarship applications, all of these various things. So definitely start early. So again, so that you're not procrastinating, you're not getting to the last minute or it's right before you have to apply, then you're trying to figure it out. Avoid that
Hmm.
because it's a lot to take in. So you really want to start early. That's my number one thing. Start early. Um, Please, as parents, I always stress to understand that your student is in the driver's seat. This is their process. This is their education. This is their life. This is not about you in this way. You are in that passenger seat. You still have a role. Definitely. You need to support them through this process. You're the one with the life experience. You may have gone to college, you may not have, but bottom line, you are the adult. So you want to support them, but they are leading this process. So that means that if you are coming to college fairs, they need to come to the table. You can come step behind them a little bit, let them ask questions first so that they become more comfortable asking questions. And then, of course, if you have questions, come up and ask your questions as well. But let them start that process. If you are coming to campus visits, which are really important in this process, let them check in. When you're on the tour, let them process what's going on, let them ask questions. Don't take over the process. Maybe you all talk about it after the fact, but let them process it for themselves as an individual, and that way you all can have a really meaningful conversation with you. Maybe imposing your thoughts or your kind of desires, like, no, I want you to do this in the moment. Let them have that moment. So understand, again, they are in the driver's seat. You are a support, but your role is very important when it comes to financial. What can you afford? What makes sense? How far do you want to be away from home? It's a lot of things that you definitely, again, have a part in. But again, your student is driving the process. Let them lead, please, please.
Hmm.
And then finally, I will just say, please do not let this process take over your lives. That is not the goal. This should be fun. Your student, you all should be excited about this next phase of their life. But some individuals, they will let this take completely over. And when it does that, it's a negative process. It's overwhelming. It's not fun, and it should be fun. So please don't let this take over your life. Try to set some parameters around maybe when you talk about the process. A lot of times, as admission reps, we'll say maybe set a certain week day of the week, maybe a certain time on that day, maybe on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever
Hmm.
that may be, or after dinner, whatever that is, and you set it like an hour. This is our day and this is our time that we talk about admissions. What did you learn this week? What schools are you thinking about? What things matter to you? What kind of schools you know? And then as a parent, maybe as you're doing your research, you can share what you're learning. And then that's your time to really communicate about the process. And then you cut it off and deal with and talk about other things that have nothing to do with college admissions, and you just live your life so that you can really appreciate and enjoy the process. And again, do not let it overwhelm you. So please, again, do not let this process take over your life. Give yourself some grace, set parameters as you go through this process.
Well, those are amazing pieces of advice. This whole conversation has been a tremendous overview of the great things that UC Berkeley has to offer its students, your overall review process, and the advice not only to students, but their parents. Joa, UC Berkeley is obviously so lucky to have you, as were we on this podcast episode. And I have to tell you, I'm so happy, as I know that this conversation is going to help so many students and their parents as they navigate the college admissions process. I do hope to have you again in the future, Joa. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. I appreciate being here, and thank you for the invitation to participate on the podcast.
Well, my honor and pleasure. And one last thing to say to everyone out there, good luck with the admissions process and best wishes to all. Take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAP. I want to welcome back Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert. Sean, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, John. Just wanted to do a quick shout out for an amazing deal that we have for college admissions process podcast listeners. We're offering 30% off all Prep Expert SAT and ACT courses and tutoring. It's live online. We've got the best score improvement guarantees in the industry. You'll get taught by 99 percentile instructors. And you can save 30% off when you go to the show notes of the College Admissions Process podcast. Grab your discount code for 30% off and click the link in the show notes.
Thank you, Sean. So great to have you again. And to everyone out there, please note that if you make a purchase through any of our affiliate links, the podcast gets a commission. But rest assured that we would only promote products that we believe in and feel would benefit our listeners. Thank you all, and best wishes.